The road stretched endlessly ahead, swallowed by the thick darkness of the Mexican countryside. The only light came from our car's headlights, cutting through the pitch-black night, illuminating the cracked pavement and the occasional road sign. The warm, humid air clung to the windows, making everything outside feel thick and heavy, like the night itself was pressing down on us. It was later than we should have been driving. My mom had wanted to stop for the night hours ago, back when we passed a small town with a few motels and a brightly lit gas station. But my dad, stubborn as ever, had insisted on pushing forward. "We're making good time," he had said earlier that evening, dismissing my mother's concerns. "We've done this drive 100 times." And sure, we had. Our family was originally from Mexico, and we visited every summer to see relatives. The drive from the U.S. took days, but we knew the route well. The highways, the small villages we'd passed through, the stretches of countryside where nothing but vast fields and occasional roadside shrines stood. But something about this night felt different. Wrong. The roads were quieter than usual. Too quiet. Normally, we'd see trucks, other travelers, late-night buses heading toward the cities. But for the past hour, it had just been us. No headlights in the distance. No taillights ahead. Just empty road and darkness. I was in the back seat with my younger brother, half awake, watching the shadows flicker across the car's interior as the headlights cut through the night. My mom sat in the front passenger seat, tense, her fingers drumming nervously on her knee. My dad was focused on the road, humming softly to the radio. The air inside the car felt thick, like it was holding in something unspoken. Then we saw them. 3 figures standing in the middle of the road. At first, I thought they were police. Maybe a checkpoint. That wasn't uncommon in Mexico, random security stops, officers checking vehicles for weapons or drugs. But something felt off. The men weren't wearing uniforms. No badges. No reflective vests. Just dark clothes and masks covering their faces. My dad slowed the car slightly, and my mother immediately tensed. "No," she said sharply. "Don't stop." He hesitated. "What if it's a checkpoint?" My mother didn't answer, just gripped his arm, her fingers digging into his skin. I looked ahead. The men were standing still, completely silent. No flashlights. No signals to pull over. Then one of them stepped forward and raised something in his hand. A metal pipe. I barely had time to register what was happening before the man swung it at our windshield. Glass shattered. My mother screamed. My dad slammed his foot on the gas. The car lurched forward, tires screeching against the pavement. The men lunged. I saw one of them reaching for the driver's side door handle, his fingers almost gripping it before we sped past him. Another man threw something heavy, a rock? Another piece of metal, and it slammed into the back window, leaving a deep crack. Then they were behind us. I twisted in my seat, heart hammering. One of the men was running after the car, his shadowed figure illuminated briefly by the red glow of our taillights before he disappeared into the darkness. No one spoke. The car was speeding now, my dad's knuckles white as he gripped the wheel. My mother was trembling, whispering a prayer under her breath. I could still hear the sound of the glass breaking, the heavy thud of the object hitting the back window. My brother, who had been silent the entire time, finally whispered, "What did they want?" No one answered, because we already knew. They weren't cops. They weren't security. They were waiting for someone like us, a family traveling at night, alone. Easy prey. We kept driving, my dad not slowing for even a second. The silence was thick, heavy with the weight of what had just happened. Then, after about 20 minutes, we saw it. Headlights. A single truck ahead of us, moving slowly. A real police truck. We caught up to them quickly, my dad flashing his high beams, desperate to get their attention. The truck slowed slightly, and we stayed close as possible without seeming suspicious. My dad muttered, "I don't care where they're going. We're following them all the way there." No one argued. For the next hour, we stayed behind the truck, unwilling to let it out of our sight. Eventually, the road led to a small town, where streetlights and the faint glow of houses replaced the darkness. We pulled into a gas station, the first one we had seen in miles. Only then did we finally stop. My dad got out of the car and examined the windshield, running a hand over the shattered glass, now held together only by cracks and sheer luck. I got out too, my legs shaky. The night air felt different here, not quite safe, but at least we weren't in the middle of nowhere anymore. My mom was still inside the car, whispering a soft prayer. My brother sat quietly, hugging his knees. We didn't speak about what had just happened. Not then. Not the next day. Not for years. But to this day, when I close my eyes, I can still see them. Standing in the road. Waiting. And I still wonder what would have happened if my dad had stopped. The road stretched endlessly before us, winding through unfamiliar streets, illuminated only by the dull glow of streetlights. It was supposed to be a simple drive, a straight shot from one city to another, with nothing but open highways between us and our vacation destination. But a single wrong turn had changed everything. It had started with MapQuest. I should have known better. This was years ago, before GPS apps were as reliable as they are now, back when you had to print out your directions and hope they didn't lead you down a dead-end road. My girlfriend, Emily, had the folded-up papers in her lap, squinting at the small font as she tried to make sense of the directions. "I think we missed the exit," she murmured, frowning. I gripped the steering wheel a little tighter, glancing at the darkened road signs. "What do you mean we missed it? It should have been a left back there." She pointed over her shoulder, but there was no way I was turning around now. "We'll just find another route," I said, trying to sound calm. Emily sighed, flipping through the pages. "There's a detour. Looks like we can cut through the city and loop back to the highway." That sounded easy enough. But as we kept driving, the streets changed. At first, it was subtle. The gas stations and fast food joints became less frequent, replaced by old, shuttered buildings with boarded-up windows. The streetlights flickered, some of them completely dark. The further we drove, the more my stomach twisted. The sidewalks were lined with figures, people standing in groups, watching as we passed. Some leaned against the walls of crumbling buildings, others sat hunched on curbs, their faces obscured by shadows. Emily shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "I don't like this." Neither did I. The road ahead was empty except for a single streetlight casting an eerie, yellow glow. Under it, a man on a bicycle appeared from the side of the road, pedaling lazily in our direction. I slowed down, not wanting to hit him, but as we got closer, he veered directly toward us. I slammed on the brakes. The man skidded to a stop inches from the car, his face twisted in rage. He threw his arms in the air, shouting something I couldn't hear through the windows. Emily gasped. "What is he doing?" I didn't wait to find out. I swerved around him, hitting the gas. In the rearview mirror, I saw him shaking his fist, still yelling. That was the first sign we had made a mistake. The second came moments later. A block ahead, a group of kids stood in the middle of the road, laughing and playing near a fire hydrant that was spraying water into the street. At first, I thought nothing of it, just kids having fun. But as we approached, one of them turned, saw us coming, and smirked. Then he kicked something toward the car. A metal trash can lid. It slammed against the front bumper with a loud clang, making Emily jump. "What the hell?" I muttered. The kids laughed, their laughter echoing down the empty street. Something felt wrong. Really, really wrong. I pressed on the gas, maneuvering around them as they shouted things I couldn't understand. Emily gripped my arm. "We need to get out of here. Now." I couldn't agree more. I glanced at the directions again, trying to figure out the fastest way back to the highway. Then something moved on the sidewalk. A woman. She was staring right at us. She was old, her hair tangled, her clothes dirty and torn. Her eyes were wide, almost too wide, like she hadn't slept in days. She limped toward us, her bare feet slapping against the pavement. I barely had time to react before she was right next to Emily's window. She slammed her hand against the glass. Emily screamed. The woman's mouth moved, whispering something, but I couldn't hear her. Then I saw her other hand, clutching a rusty piece of metal. I didn't think. I just floored it. The car lurched forward, leaving the woman behind. Emily was breathing hard, her hands shaking. What the hell is happening? I didn't know. I just knew we weren't safe here. The streets were getting narrower, the buildings closer together. Every intersection looked the same, rows of old apartments with shattered windows, graffiti-covered alleyways leading into darkness. It was a maze, and we were lost in it. Then a shadow moved ahead of us. A figure stepped into the street. A man in a hoodie, standing perfectly still, waiting. Behind him, more people appeared. From the alleys, from the doorways, from behind parked cars. All of them watching us. Emily's voice was barely a whisper. "They're blocking the road." My hands tightened on the wheel. "I see them." The man in the hoodie took one step forward, then another. I had two choices. Stop or keep driving. I hit the gas. The car shot forward, and at the last second, the group split apart. We sped through them, barely missing the man in the hoodie as he jumped out of the way. Emily was crying now, clutching her phone. "Call someone," I said, my voice shaking. "Call the police." She tried. No signal. The streets blurred together. Left, right, another left. Nothing looked familiar anymore. Then, like a miracle, a sign. Interstate entrance, 2 miles. I followed it, my heart racing. The streets widened, the buildings looking less abandoned, less threatening. A few minutes later, we were back on the highway. Emily let out a shaky breath, still gripping my arm. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Only when we were miles away did I dare to look at her. "We're never taking that route again," I said. She nodded. Neither of us ever spoke about that night again. But sometimes, I still think about the people in that neighborhood. The way they watched. The way they moved. Like they had been expecting us. Our honeymoon was supposed to be perfect. After months of exhausting wedding planning, juggling relatives' expectations, and handling last-minute changes, we were finally free. Just the two of us. No more phone calls, no more obligations, just a quiet getaway in paradise. We wanted something special, somewhere off the beaten path, away from the crowded resorts filled with screaming kids and overpriced cocktails. That's how we found La Casa del March. It was a small, locally owned beachfront hotel in a quiet part of town, about 30 minutes from the city center. The website boasted authentic charm and a secluded, peaceful atmosphere, perfect for couples looking to relax. The pictures had sold us a Spanish-style villa, a crystal-clear pool, palm trees swaying gently in the breeze. And best of all, the price was shockingly reasonable. I should have known that was a red flag, but at the time, I was too excited to care. We arrived late in the afternoon, the sun beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The drive to the hotel had been scenic, but oddly empty. No other tourists, no passing cars. Just stretches of quiet road winding through dense greenery, leading us toward the coastline. When we pulled up, the first thing I noticed was that the place looked older than in the pictures. Not run down, exactly, but worn. The building's white stucco walls were faded, cracked in places. The once bright blue trim was chipped, dull. The large wooden doors leading into the lobby creaked when they opened. Still, it had a certain charm. A tall man greeted us at the front desk, introducing himself as Carlos, the hotel manager. He was polite, soft-spoken, but something about him felt off. His eyes lingered on Anna a little too long, and when he smiled, it didn't quite reach his eyes. The check-in process was quick, and within minutes, Carlos handed us an old-fashioned brass key. "Room 203. Ocean view," he said with a thin smile. "Enjoy your stay." The moment we stepped into our room, the smell hit us. It was thick, pungent, and sickly sweet, clinging to the air like something rotten had seeped into the walls. Anna coughed. "What is that?" I set our bags down, wrinkling my nose. Maybe the AC hasn't been on in a while? I crossed the room and turned on the air conditioning unit beneath the window. It rattled to life, blowing out a stream of lukewarm air. The smell didn't go away. Anna wandered around, opening the closet, checking the bathroom. "It smells worse over here," she called. I walked over to where she stood near the bed. The smell was definitely stronger there, an almost decaying organic stench. "Ugh," she groaned. "Maybe there's a dead animal in the walls or something." I tried to laugh, but it came out forced. The bed looked fine, white sheets, fluffy pillows. But when I sat down, something felt off. The mattress sank weirdly beneath me, not like a normal soft mattress, like there was something underneath it. I shifted uncomfortably. "This bed feels strange." Anna sat beside me and ran her hands over the mattress. Her brow furrowed. "Yeah, it dips in the middle, like something's underneath it." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Anna said, "Should we check?" I let out a nervous chuckle. "What? You think there's a dead body under there?" It was meant as a joke, but neither of us laughed. Because the second I said it, a sick, heavy feeling settled in my stomach. I hesitated. Then I lifted the mattress and immediately dropped it. Anna screamed. Because there was a body underneath the bed. A human body stuffed awkwardly into the base of the bed frame. I saw bloated, discolored skin, a face twisted into a frozen scream, its eyes staring up at us, blank and milky white. The skin looked wet, almost waxy, like it had been there for days. The stench of decay rushed out, filling the room with its putrid, inescapable stink. Anna gagged, stumbling back against the wall, her hands shaking. I couldn't breathe. My brain refused to process what I was seeing. We had been sitting on that bed, lying on it. I grabbed my phone, my fingers fumbling over the screen as I tried to dial the front desk. Carlos answered on the second ring. "Front desk." I could barely find my voice. "There's a bee body in our room." Silence. Then, in the calmest voice I've ever heard, he said, "Oh, oh, that was it. No shock. No horror. Just, oh." I felt my blood turn to ice. Anna was crying now, her hands covering her mouth. "We need to leave," she whispered. I pressed the phone to my ear, my heart pounding. "We're calling the police." Another long pause. Then, in that same eerily calm tone, Carlos said, "There's no need to do that. We'll take care of it." I didn't respond. I just grabbed Anna's hand, grabbed our bags, and ran. The hallway was empty. The front desk? Abandoned. The entire lobby was silent, too silent. I didn't stop until we were outside, where the thick, humid night air hit me like a wave. My hand shook as I dialed the police. This time, someone answered. It took 20 minutes for them to arrive. By then, the hotel manager had disappeared. The receptionist was gone. The police searched the room. But when they lifted the mattress, the body was gone. I saw the confusion on the officer's face. "You're sure you saw a body?" I wanted to say no, that maybe we had imagined it. But the smell still clung to our clothes. And we knew what we saw. Someone had removed it before the cops got there. The police took our statements but didn't seem convinced. They treated us like we had made a mistake, like we had let our imaginations get the best of us. But we knew the truth. Someone had hidden that body, and someone had taken it before the cops arrived. Anna and I left that night. We drove to the nearest city and checked into a busy, modern hotel with security cameras and too many people for anything to go unnoticed. We never spoke about that night again. But sometimes, I still think about La Casa del March. I think about who put that body there. I think about who took it away. And worst of all, I think about how long it had been there before we found it. Hawaii was supposed to be paradise. Crystal clear waters, golden beaches, endless skies, everything you picture when you think of a dream vacation. For me, it was supposed to be exactly that. A much-needed getaway from the stress of work and life. The kind of trip you book after telling yourself, "I need a break before I lose my mind." I never thought I'd leave Hawaii with something that would haunt me forever. I had been in Honolulu for 3 days, staying at a quiet little beachside rental, soaking in the sun and the slow, peaceful rhythm of island life. Everything was perfect until the night I got sick. It hit me suddenly, a wave of nausea and dizziness that sent me retreating from the beach earlier than planned. By the time I reached my car, my body ached, my skin burned, and my stomach twisted with sharp, unbearable cramps. Food poisoning, I thought. Maybe I ate some bad seafood. I barely made it back to my rental before collapsing onto the bed. My whole body felt feverish, clammy with sweat. I needed medicine, something to settle my stomach, but the thought of walking around a grocery store in this state made me want to pass out. So I made the decision to go to a 24-hour drive-through pharmacy instead. I figured I could just stay in the car, grab some over-the-counter meds, and go straight back to sleep. That choice put me in the wrong place at the wrong time. The streets were quiet as I drove through Honolulu at night. The air was thick with humidity, my windows slightly cracked to let in the ocean breeze. The fever had made me lightheaded, my vision swimming slightly, but I forced myself to focus. The pharmacy was just a few blocks away when I pulled up to a red light at an intersection. That's when I saw her. A woman in the car next to me. A black sedan sat in the lane beside mine, idling at the light. In the passenger seat was a woman, her face pale, her body pressed against the window. She looked terrified. At first, I thought she was sick, maybe drunk, maybe asleep. But then she moved suddenly, her hands banging against the glass, her mouth forming words I couldn't hear. I stared, and then she looked at me. Our eyes locked for half a second, and I swear to God, I saw pure, desperate fear. Her lips moved rapidly, mouthing something over and over. "Help me." I couldn't breathe. Then, a man's hand shot out from the driver's seat, grabbing her by the hair, yanking her back. The woman disappeared from sight. My stomach twisted. I froze, hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. What the hell did I just see? The light turned green. The sedan lurched forward, speeding through the intersection. My body moved before my brain did. I threw my car into drive and followed them. Adrenaline flooded through me, overriding the fever, the dizziness, everything. I didn't think. I just knew that something was very, very wrong. The black sedan wove through the streets, taking sudden turns, as if the driver had noticed me. I kept my distance, trying not to be obvious. My heart hammered as I reached for my phone, my fingers shaking. 911. I pressed call. It rang. And rang. Then, a message played in my ear. All operators are currently busy. Please hold. No. 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 I had never needed to call 911 before in my life, and now that I did, I was on hold. I tightened my grip on the wheel, eyes locked on the sedan. It took another sharp turn, heading toward a more isolated road, away from the city lights. That's when I saw it. A flip-flop in the middle of the street. I barely avoided running it over. It was small, white, and floral patterned, and I knew it belonged to her. My stomach twisted. I had two choices: keep following or turn back. I was alone, unarmed, half delirious with fever. I could be driving straight into something I wasn't prepared to handle. But if I turned back, who else would help her? The road ahead was empty, lined with palm trees and shadows. The sedan sped up, heading toward the outskirts of town. Then, it happened. The car's brake lights flashed, just for a second. Then the passenger door flung open, and the woman jumped out. I gasped, slamming my brakes as she tumbled onto the pavement, rolling hard. For a second, I thought, oh God, she's dead. But then she moved, crawling, trying to get away. The sedan screeched to a halt. The driver's door burst open. A man stepped out, tall, dark clothes, moving fast. I didn't think. I just threw my car into park, flung open the door, and ran toward her. She was shaking violently, gasping for breath. Help me, she sobbed. The man was coming toward us. Fast. I put myself between them, my heart racing. What the hell are you doing? I shouted, trying to keep my voice steady. The man stopped. His face was empty, emotionless, like I wasn't even there. Then, without a word, he turned around, got back into the sedan, and sped away, vanishing into the darkness. I was left standing there, my own breath ragged, the woman clinging to my leg, sobbing. By the time the police finally arrived, she could barely speak. She was shaking, crying, her words coming in fragmented gasps. They took her away in an ambulance. I never found out her name. I never found out what happened to her. But for the rest of my trip, I kept checking the news. Kept waiting to hear about a missing woman found, or a suspect arrested. But there was nothing. No reports. No investigations. Like it had never happened at all. And the scariest part? The man in the sedan was still out there, looking for someone else. Our trip to Washington State had been planned for months. A group vacation, just me and my closest friends, taking a break from our hectic city lives. We wanted something different, not the usual crowded resorts or overhyped tourist traps. Instead, we found an Airbnb listing deep in the woods. A secluded, 2-story log cabin surrounded by towering pine trees and miles of wilderness. The kind of place where the only sounds were the rustling leaves and distant hoots of owls. At the time, it seemed perfect. It wasn't. We arrived late in the afternoon, just as the sun was beginning to set. The drive had been long, winding through narrow mountain roads with no cell phone reception. By the time we reached the house, we were exhausted but excited. There were 6 of us. Me, eager for a break from my stressful job. Tyler, my best friend since childhood, always up for an adventure. Mia, Tyler's girlfriend, who had booked the Airbnb. Derek, my college roommate, the sarcastic one of the group. Sam and Rachel, a couple who had been dating forever. The first thing I noticed about the cabin was how old it looked. Not run down exactly, but definitely weathered, like it had been sitting in those woods for decades, untouched by time. The wood was darkened by age, the stone chimney cracked in places. The surrounding trees were eerily dense, pressing in on the house from all sides. It made the cabin feel smaller, almost claustrophobic. The inside was cozy but had a weird musty smell, like it had been shut up for too long. Dust swirled in the air when we dropped our bags. That night, we made a fire, drank cheap beer, played music, and laughed until our stomachs hurt. It felt normal, like any other trip we'd taken together. Then, in the middle of the night, something woke me up. A sound. At first, I thought it was just the wind. But as I listened, I realized it was something else. Leaves crunching. Slow. Deliberate. Like footsteps. I held my breath, straining to hear. Then, from the corner of my window, a shadow moved. My body went cold. I couldn't see it clearly, but there was someone out there, standing just beyond the trees, watching. I sat up, heart pounding. The figure stood completely still, as if it knew I had seen it. Then, it stepped back into the darkness. Gone. I wanted to believe it was just my imagination, that maybe I was seeing things in the shadows. But then, the next morning at breakfast, Derek said something that made my stomach drop. Dude, did anyone else hear someone walking around outside last night? Tyler frowned. Like an animal? Derek shook his head. No, man. It sounded like footsteps. Mia shivered. That's not funny. I'm not trying to be funny, Derek muttered. It was right outside my window. None of us spoke for a moment. Then Rachel laughed, breaking the tension. Okay, relax. We're in the woods. It was probably just a deer or something. We agreed, because the alternative was too unsettling to think about. We spent the day hiking and swimming in a nearby lake. By the time we got back, the whole footsteps thing was forgotten, until Sam saw the footprints. We had just finished gathering firewood when he called us over. Guys, look at this. We all walked to where he stood, staring down at the dirt near the tree line. There, in the damp soil, were bare footprints. Not boot prints. Bare human feet. And they were fresh. Rachel's face paled. That could still be an animal, right? Derek shook his head. That's human. The prints led from the trees to the cabin. Someone had been here, watching. That night, we locked every door and window. No one joked anymore. No one laughed. Tyler kept a hunting knife next to his bed. Derek grabbed the fireplace poker. We tried to act normal, playing card games and drinking. But there was something in the air now. A tension. A feeling that something wasn't right. When it was finally time for bed, no one wanted to sleep alone. Mia and Rachel bunked together. Derek and Sam stayed up all night, keeping the lights on in the living room. I lay in bed, eyes open, ears straining for any sound. Then, at 3:12 a.m., my doorknob turned. Slowly, deliberately. My body went rigid. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. There was a shadow beneath the door. Someone was standing outside my room. I squeezed my eyes shut, pretending to be asleep. Then, the knob stopped turning, and I heard it. A breath. Shallow. Close. Right outside my door. I lay there, paralyzed, my heart pounding so loud I thought whoever was out there could hear it. Then, the floor creaked, and the shadow moved away. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. At breakfast, I didn't say anything. Neither did Derek. Neither did Tyler. But I saw it in their faces. They had heard it too. We decided to leave that morning. As we packed up, Sam checked his phone and went pale. Guys. He turned the screen toward us. It was a local news alert. A man was arrested last night in a town 10 miles from here for breaking into a house. When police caught him, he was standing in the couple's bedroom, watching them sleep. The room spun around me. Mia gasped. Oh my God, none of us spoke. We didn't need to, because we all knew. Whoever had been outside our cabin, whoever had been watching us, had been inside the house, too.